voices blending, melodies ascending, harmony in the air. Our songs are never ending. In the barbershop we create magic. Brad and John Show, yeah, it's pure classic. No instruments needed, just our vocal range. Notes flying high, it's our musical exchange. Tracy's station may try, but they can't compete. Our barbershop style, it can't be beat. Oh, the harmony of voices, so sweet. In the barbershop of life, our tunes will repeat. No need for instruments, no need for a band. Just the Brad and John Show, the finest in the land.
It is the Brad and John Show. I am Brad, he is John. Is that the way we do it? Brad and John? I'm Brad, you're John?
I think that's the way it works in the old BS show. You'd say, I'm Shelley, she's Brad. I love that line.
I get it backwards all the time. And you know who else we have this morning, John?
Who's that?
Say hello to Oyster Bunnies.
The Oyster Bunnies are here this morning.
Oh, I miss Joe Biden's senile old voice.
I'm telling you. Okay, that's John Combest. And why do we have him here? Because...
Time for the John Combest Top 3.
Every day, Monday through Friday. By the way, I forgot to mention, this is January 31st. This is A Block. Every single day of the year since, 2001, John? 2001, 2002? Is that how long it's been?
Yeah, it was October of 01, so late in 01, yeah.
Late in 01, every single morning, John puts together the list of the important things you need to know going on in the state of Missouri. It's called johncombest.com. Amazing how he got that domain name way back when. You probably had to pay, $40,000 or $50,000 because there were probably a couple dozen John Combest.
I think so. It might have been $9.99 or maybe $14.99 right. Back then.
Okay. He puts together this list, and we start off the show every single morning with this guy.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what he does, he counts them down, and he starts with...
In third place...
Hey, Brad, I got a question about an old friend of yours.
Uh-oh, who's that?
You know Kevin Killeen.
I do know Kevin
Brad?
Killeen. Yeah, I know him quite well, yes.
And remind us, who's Kevin Killeen again?
I will say Kevin Killeen is probably the best news guy I've ever had the pleasure of working with. He actually did news for me back when I ran my old news network, when I was doing the traffic network. He moved on to KMOX, and now he's the PR flack for St. Charles County, correct?
Yes, Brad, but he doesn't bring bad news. He brings terrible news. 11 people have been arrested in St. Charles County, Brad, and they might get deported. Did you hear this?
Now, is this a Kevin Killeen PR announcement he sent out? Is that seriously? Is that what he said?
Yeah, it's some great news. Now, this is brought to us by the good folks at St. Louis Public Radio, Brad. You know, they do a lot of on-the-ground reporting. This comes from their general assignment reporter, Lucretia Wembley. And she was doing a real feel-good story about a bunch of Mexicans complaining about Donald Trump. But buried in the story, Brad, talk about burying the lead. She has a quote from your old compadre, Kevin Killeen, who, as you mentioned, is the spokesman for St. Charles County now. Now, St. Charles County police on unrelated crimes have picked up 11 folks. By the way, Brad, these are just arrests. They're just allegations, you know? These folks haven't been found guilty in a court of law, but they just so happen to be here less than legally. So Kevin Killeen's key quote, and I think this is important because it gives us insight into what local government, local law enforcement deals with. Kevin Killeen's quote is, they, being these alleged 11 criminals, weren't picked up because of their immigration status, but they are believed to be illegal immigrants. And after their local stuff is taken care of, then ICE would be notified that we have these people here that we believe are not in the country legally. And then Killeen continues, but apparently there hasn't been any directive from ICE saying, hey, who have you got? So in other words, Brad, when these illegal aliens commit crimes, they're captured, they're taken into custody, and they're charged. And it seems like the local authorities will keep them and charge them and then contact ICE. Now, this contradicts a lot of the memes that you're seeing from media. Spoiler, we might get to this in story number 2, of ICE agents are on every corner, Brad. They're outside every Mexican restaurant. They're ready to just pounce on anybody who has black or brown skin. Anyway, Kevin Killeen is in the news. Great news, Brad. Looks like we may have captured 11 illegal aliens here. Isn't that great?
Well, I'm a little confused of the story there, John. Okay, so in other words, you're saying that this is SOP, that they're doing the proper thing? Or what was...
Yeah, I think so. I think what Kevin Killeen is saying is that they capture these folks. They hold them in custody for whatever charge. So let's say Juan Carlos operates a lawnmower illegally, right? And he runs over Pedro's foot, and it's illegal, and they go to the hospital, and there was some kind of a crime for operating a lawnmower at 11 p.m., let's say. So they would be charged in St. Charles County, and then they wouldn't notify, they being St. Charles County, whatever law enforcement office is, wouldn't contact ICE immediately. They would process these charges and then contact ICE. You see what I'm saying?
Well, and then would they release them to ICE, essentially for deportation? Is that the whole gist of this story then?
I don't know. It's not clear from this story what happens next. I'm guessing that these folks, these alleged illegal alien criminals, will be charged for whatever theft, robbery, whatever they did here. Jaywalking, whatever the case may be. Maybe they put a little too much spice in the tacos.
Well, now
Give somebody heartburn.
Hold on a minute, John. This story was on stlpublicradio.org, stlpr.org, correct?
Correct, and the headline is ongoing federal deportation efforts. Hold on. Increase fear and paranoia across the St. Louis region. Oh.
Okay. Now, who was the reporter that did the story?
She is a woman named Lucretia Wembley.
Well,
Lucretia Wembley.
You know, I know darn well that you're a fan of Lucretia Wembley because she never ventured out from the stlpr.org studios to do this story, because there's no way in hell that any stlpr.org reporter would cross the Missouri River into St. Charles County, because there, you know, I was at a fundraiser for STL Public Radio years ago, and it was interesting because I told him I lived in St. Charles County, and the one guy came up to me and he says, "When you get on the Daniel Boone Bridge, doesn't it like end halfway across and you just fall into the Missouri River?"
You just fall into the river. Yeah. You're down there with the catfish and the gar.
I go, yeah, and we don't have to swim that far to the casino. That's what's so nice about it. You know, we just
that's what's beautiful about
swim
it.
A little bit down.
Now, to be fair, Lucretia Wembley was covering, Brad, there was a protest at Woodson Terrace. It drew nearly 50 people yesterday. Can you believe it? Now, the protest isn't the focus of this story, I think. That's the joy of a lot of these stories, Brad, because you read the headline that's supposed to give you some sort of an emotional reaction, you know, like Trump weighs in on helicopter crash with no proof. And you're supposed to, you know, the headline leads you into what the mainstream media wants you to believe. But if you dig a little deeper, you can find good news, like 11 aliens might get deported.
You know, there was a time, John, when if you were in the St. Charles County and you knew certain things, there was a certain apartment complex that was populated by probably 80%, well, shall we say, Latinos who were brought into the St. Louis area to work construction in St. Charles County. And it was a known fact that probably 2 of them were here legally. And it was, nobody said anything about it. It just sort of went by the wayside. But I guess that's changing, right?
Yeah, I guess so. And, you know, if I'm a union guy out there who spends my day swinging a hammer and putting together an A-frame, not like you used to do in college with your buddies, Brad, but putting together another type of A-frame, I'd probably be pretty upset that this illegal labor is undermining my wages.
Okay, on to number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
We'll stay with the immigration theme, Brad, because all around the state, excuse me, from St. Louis to Kansas City to Springfield, people are rising up against Donald Trump. They're not happy. A couple things, Brad. First of all, no one is illegal on stolen land, That sign was at every protest that we see today, from St. Louis headlines, Kansas City headlines, and Springfield. Brad, I have each of these stories up today on johncombest.com, and I think the most appealing one, visually, is the photo gallery from the Springfield News Leader. There was a big Hispanic immigrant rally down in Springfield, and a highlight to me was that a woman named who calls herself Jay, she was spray painting signs, right? She had a whole set. And one of them, she was talking about State Senator David Gregory. We talked about him. He had that supposed bounty bill. You know, you might be able to get a bounty for turning in, giving a tip about an illegal alien. First of all, I think the most important thing is she attempted to paint a mural, like a little portrait of David Gregory on a sign, and she made him look like a 60, like, Brad, if you hadn't shaved in, I don't know, a month and hadn't showered, she made David Gregory look like an unshaven, unkempt Brad Hildebrand, which is quite a feat, you know? And then the rest of her sign says bounties on the working people. Now, she spells bounties wrong. So I would think if you were an immigrant or you were a pro-immigrant protester, one of the things you'd want to focus on is getting your English correct, right? We don't speak Mexican here, Brad. We don't just put an S on the end of bounty. Anyway, it's an inspirational picture. And there were also some really good messages, I think, on some of the homemade signs. One of them says the F word, ice. So F, ice. And the other one is really funny, Brad, or maybe punny. It says ice effing melt. Get it? It's wintertime. People use ice melt. So they were a little thin on ice messages here, Brad, but very efficacious. So if you want to see some chubby people that should be walking but are instead driving around in a car, you want to see a lot of Mexican flags, go to my website and click on the photo galleries, Brad.
Did they have the paper towels with them?
What do you mean?
The bounty paper towels? Get it? Paper towels?
They did not have the bounty paper towels. They did not. They had. Now, I love the David Gregory portrait. It was starting to run. The ink was running a little bit, or the paint was running. It might have been raining there. Speaking of David Gregory, Brad, I'd like to point out, if you're ever driving in West St. Louis County and you're coming off Highway 40 at Olive and Clarkson, you know where Edgewild is right there by Chesterfield Mall, Brad?
I know exactly where it's at, yeah.
Up until, I don't know, I think it's still there. It was certainly there as of a week ago. There was a Joe Pereles campaign sign still in the gully right outside of Edgewild. Now, Joe Pereles was the Democrat who ran against David Gregory. I thought near the end of the election that Joe Pereles was going to win. I'm wrong about stuff all the time, Brad. I thought there was no way David Gregory was going to win that race. Brad, Joe Pereles has still not picked up all of his campaign signs. So when you're going to Edgewild or you're just getting off 40 and you're going to God's country in Chesterfield, you're going to still see a campaign sign that's been there since September. If I am the Missouri Chamber of Commerce and I bankrolled Joe Pereles' campaign, I would take it upon myself to send someone to Chesterfield and pick up my Joe Pereles yard sign. Kara Korchis is the new CEO of Missouri Chamber. Kara, send someone to pick up your sign. Well, Joe Pereles is like Brad's age. He can't get around. He can't navigate a slope. Joe Pereles can walk in gay pride parades, but he can't seem to pick up his own yard signs. Anyway, Kara Korchis, or anybody from the Peerless campaign, pick up your trash. We choose to live in a civilized area like Chesterfield so that we don't have to deal with riffraff. Go clean up our community, please.
John,
that's my PSA, Brad.
This is where you and I disagree. I mean, he's just getting ahead of the next election cycle. That's how I've got to look at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe he'll run for something else.
And matter of fact, it's funny you should mention that because over the past couple of weeks, I've seen several election signs still up, and I'm thinking to myself, okay. You know, and here's the crazy thing. There used to be what was called, and I'm not making this up, this is a true story, they called him the sign Nazi in St. Peter's. And the sign Nazi worked for the city of St. Peter's. And if you had any kind of a sign in your yard or in the corner, it was gone. You know,
and you've been to that dumpster. You've taken a trip to that exact dumpster where the sign Nazi would throw them in. Haven't you, Brad?
No, they were stacked up on the side of City Hall because all the signs he picked up. And I think at one point in time, he really angered the real estate agents because he was picking up, you know, open house signs and things like that. You know, which I'm going like, okay. But see, here once again, I say that I think all yard signs for political people should be illegal. Why is it okay that you can have yard signs for political people, but if you want to put a yard sign up for a garage sale, the sign Nazi comes and grabs it? But yet, if it's for a mayor or a alderman or state rep or something like, oh, that's okay. Why should the political folks get better treatment? It's just like, for example, I give you a story. Last night, or the other night, I was up in NoCo, on 270. The city of Hazelwood has one of their electronic billboards that's on the North Service Road. I guess it would be Dunn Road. And they put, messages on there. Drive carefully. It's one of the construction zone kind of signs. I'm thinking to myself, if a business owner did that at 9 o'clock in the morning, at 10 o'clock in the morning, whatever the guy would be, like the planning and zoning guys would be there writing a ticket. Why are they allowed to do that? I don't think it's right.
I think that when it comes to yard signs, you should get the Dua Lipa singers on it, Brad. And maybe you should even come up with an AI-generated wacky song about how yard signs suck. I don't know. I'm spitballing, but you know who's not spitballing? One of the senators in story number one.
The number one.
A story that's near and dear to your heart, Brad. Republicans talking a lot of sense to union members. Now, Brad, you've gone on the record, even yesterday. I think you have a pretty fair view of America's unions. Not all good, not all bad. We can't paint them in a positive light all the time, leadership. We can't paint them in a negative light all the time. And you know who has a similarly balanced approach to you, Brad? Senator Josh Hawley. And from what Axios is reporting, a reporter named Steph Kite, go fly a Steph Kite, says that Josh Hawley sat down with Teamsters President Sean O'Brien on Tuesday, and he's got a modest proposal. Josh Hawley's modest proposal is legislation that would keep employers from stalling union negotiations. When there's a negotiation going on, Josh Hawley says that some of these companies stall the unions for years. Josh Hawley has legislation that would keep that to months. Now, I don't know exactly how that mechanism works, Brad, and I know that you're more of an expert than I am. And let me point out real quick before we actually discuss this, I know we're coming up on break, that I got this story from the great Tony Bateo, Tony'sKansasCity.com, originally had this story, and Tony adds a little commentary on his own site as well. So I have links to that. So, Brad, this is Josh Hawley. He played a lot of footsies during his reelection campaign with union folks. It paid off. He won by a big margin. And now he's working with national Teamsters on this legislation.
Well, now is when you're saying delaying, are you talking about from the time the employees decide they want to go union to the point where they actually are union? Is that what you're talking about, where the companies are dragging their feet?
Yeah, it looks like it. And Axios points out here that they point to unionized workers at Starbucks, Amazon, and Trader Joe's have all been stuck trying to negotiate first contracts with their employees.
Right, exactly. So in other words, the union's been voted in and the employers are just like, well, we're working on it. We'll get back there.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I understand that. Matter of fact, there was something in the news just the other day that's one of them, I think, was 2 years after the election. They still don't have a contract. But, hey, you know what? I guess they can just say, the employers can just say, hey, we're moving as fast as we can. We're just like the government. You know what I mean?
That's exactly.
It's only taken
Doge,
right. It's only taken 2 years. Come on. You want that permit to build a new house? California, maybe we'll get it to you in 10 years. That's expedited. Okay, we have to take a break. We will be back. It is the BJ Show, and you can check it out, bjshow.co or bjshow.video.